There it goes. All right, here we go. We are live. No intro walkout music. Sorry, Brooke. You don't get that. We can do a walk out music, maybe walk at the end. Walk in, walk out. Anyway, I am joined. Welcome to Bono's Health by Brooke Siem, author of May Cause Side Effects. We'll pop that little graphic up real quick. Boom, author of May Cause Side Effects. I'll just real quick intro. Brooke is joining us from Nevada, Reno, Nevada. I know Brooke from Reebok CrossFit Fifth Ave, and it was really interesting. I have to say, doing the research for this, I listened to a bunch of your interviews. You did one with a weightlifting coach. I forgot his name, but you trying to, and it's my own ego, obviously, but you trying to remember details about like going to regionals and competing, which we did together. I was like, yeah, that's all wrong. Like, why is it all wrong? And then the fact what we're talking about here and what your book talks about is being on, and that's the part that's super interesting to me as someone who knew you during this time and didn't know, and we're not going to know people's struggles behind the scenes, and that's kind of the one of those, like, I think modern day, like, hey, everyone's going through their own thing, and it's a little cliche, but like to share it is pretty powerful stuff. So just finishing my intro, and I want to let you take the spotlight here because just so many cool aspects of this. This is Brooke's second book, May Cause Side Effects. Her first book was the Prohibition Bakery, which she opened with her partner, and details excruciatingly how terrible of a relationship that was and experience. But she brought us very, very tasty cupcakes, one of my favorite dining experiences in New York City. Unfortunately, no longer there, but boozy cupcakes is now a thing. I've seen it in other places. So boozy cupcakes, I'm going to give Brooke credit for being the first person to ever be the boozy cupcake person. So I guess you and your partner, whose name you never do mention her name, I don't think.
I don't. There's a lot of strategy in memoir writing.
And that's the other thing too I want to say before we dive a little deeper is if anyone just enjoys reading, this is one of the best written memoirs I think I've had the chance to read in a very, very long time, if not ever. And yes, and Brooke and we've known you're an excellent author, even when we did know each other in New York City. Like you did writing for CrossFit and with Keka and things like that. So for the CrossFit website. So again, very, very detailed. And again, one of our other mutual friends, Jenny Blake, who I had her on my podcast a few episodes ago. You've been on her podcast a few times. She highlighted the fact that like your ability to recall some of these things, like it is just it's really impressive. And I know this was 6 years in the making, at least.
Yeah, the whole story started about 6 years ago. Kind of started in roughly January, March of 2016, and then the whole writing process and whatnot culminated with publication on September 6th of this year, 2022.
Very, very fun sounding. And my wife just published a book as well about the Integrated Guide to Penetrative Disorders. A lot less of a fun read, very graphic in a different way. Also very necessary. And that's the thing I want to highlight here is listening to you talk on all these other platforms, whether it's YouTube and different podcasts, and just trying to get your message out there. The really big thing here, guys, and honestly, I probably should have invited you on my other podcast. Maybe we'll have you on there as well. The Demand Better podcast. And I think that's what my takeaway from this whole thing is. We need to demand better from the psychiatry field, from the healthcare space for folks here. And I want to kind of summarize my takeaway from the book in one little quote I think I heard you on another podcast say is you can cope with depression. You can choose to cope with depression. You can choose to cope with antidepressants because they have their own kind of negative thing, or you can really just address and get to the heart of the problem. And that's the way I structure my business physically as a physical therapist and the fitness space. But I do want to just say, and is that enough of an elevator pitch of what you're trying to get out there? That kind of 3 lines?
The elevator pitch for this book has been difficult from day one because what the book is about in the most straightforward way, it's about a book about my year in severe antidepressant withdrawal. I had been put on antidepressants when I was 15, right after my father passed away, and I spent the next decade and a half on the same cocktail of drugs. That was generally pretty much unregulated by the doctors I was seeing. No one ever questioned it. And then when I was 30, I decided to an opportunity dropped into my lap, and I decided to get off the drugs and figure out who I was unmedicated. And my whole world kind of exploded as I went into withdrawal. I'm really proud of the book. I know it's written really well, and it's a really important story. I run into so many people across all walks of life who've experienced something similar, very often to a greater degree even than I did. But despite that, it is still really difficult to actually get this message out there because it's controversial. Um, it's political. It shouldn't be, but it is. And it's a bit of a struggle there. So the elevator pitch is a little longer than I would like it to be. But the best one I heard is like Eat, Pray, Love meets a recovery memoir, which is kind of right, kind of not. It's not,
Yeah, and the other way I would summarize it in like one sentence is it takes 5 minutes to prescribe antidepressants, and it takes years to get off. And again, for anyone who wants to check out the book, it really is that journey of just, it's such a unique sharing, and done so well that, again, like I really do hope it could be turned into a movie based on how descriptive you are, and things like that. And so and again, leading up to this, sharing with a few of my clients and folks, and they're like, oh, like I suffer from, or I'm on antidepressants, and I've been worried about this, or I know someone going through it. And again, going and doing the research on this, any of the like YouTube videos you've been on, you see like 30 random comments that you normally don't see. Oh, I'm so glad you're sharing this. Like, I went through this 30 years ago, or I'm going through this now. And again, it's just one of those things that is hard to talk about. And ultimately, yeah, it's how do you change the system? The system is what it is. And one of my favorite other quotes, not from your book, but is from Upstream, is, I'll give credit to Dan Heath, I believe is the author. And every system will get the results it is designed to get, because it's kind of designed that way. So, and you do again a really good job. Something I talk about, and I'm very skeptical and cynical of the healthcare systems, especially, and it's just, you're in the mental health kind of piece of it a little bit less than the physical health, but there's so many overlaps. And again, as I was reading it, I was like, yeah, like these are really, you did such a good job. And it's like, unfortunate you didn't really have a single, sounds like, positive experience with any psychiatrist. And you highlight going into their office and dealing with the secretary and the poor plant that never got fed, and things like that. So it really is an excellent depiction of just how broken our healthcare system is. And not everyone makes it out the same way you did, and be able to have that perspective, and have a loving mother that can, have these kind of, lead you to what seemed to be one of the fixes. Alan was his name, right? You want to talk a little bit about Alan?
Sure. So, the book is tricky because I didn't know about antidepressant withdrawal when I started going through it. It wasn't really something that was, the psychiatrist I saw at the time, she was very dismissive of it. She said it would last it would be a few days of having the flu, was kind of the way she put it, if I even experienced any symptoms at all. As it turned out, I suffered for about a year in severe withdrawal. And so I found that I needed different types of help beyond what the current medical system could offer me. There's also the additional kind of, ghost in the room with psychiatry. Whereas if you say you're having harmful thoughts about yourself or somebody else, then they can put you on an involuntary psychiatric hold, which is a huge threat to someone who's already feeling extremely vulnerable when it comes to, their mental, emotional, and physical health and safety. So for me, antidepressant withdrawal, I was on 37.5 milligrams of Effexor, which is the lowest dose you can get on the market. And it has a very short half-life, shorter than a lot of the other antidepressants out there, which means that it doesn't stay in your body very long, and it exits your body in a way that's so swift, your brain just kind of goes like, woo, what happened, when it's not there anymore. So the withdrawal effects for drugs with half-lives tend to be a lot more intense than ones with longer half-lives. So for me, the symptoms manifested in, extreme sensory overload, eyesight, hearing, physical side effects. My skin was very sensitive. all the way to really violent, intrusive thoughts that scared me because I thought maybe I was having a psychotic break or that I was schizophrenic or that I was actually crazy and needed, really needed severe psychiatric help. And at the same time, I was starting to see glimpses of parts of me that I had never really noticed before. Like colors seemed brighter and I was feeling creative, not in a manic way, but just in a curious way. And, I could feel like when I was laughing, occasionally I would connect with the material in a way I hadn't before. And there was just these little glimpses of like, oh my God, there's more of me underneath here that I haven't experienced once in my entire adult life. And I really wanted to discover that. But that was maybe 5% of what I was experiencing. The other 95% was hell and wondering if I was actually insane. And I was too scared to talk to my psychiatrist because of the involuntary psychiatric hold thing. Now, that might not be the, advice that most doctors would give, but as a patient, it's really, really scary. And I didn't trust this woman. I didn't know her. I didn't have years of rapport with her. So I really had absolutely no reason to trust her at all. So I kept all this to myself and then started seeking out alternative ways to help me through. And the person who came through for me was actually found by my mother. His name was Alan. Alan, that's not his real name. I did need to change that for a variety of reasons, but he's just a practitioner of kind of almost like an Eastern and Western counseling modalities that kind of blend together. But it wasn't talk therapy. It was all done over the phone. It was entirely self-compassion based. So it was about integrating all of the broken parts of yourself, about clearing them out, dealing with whatever they're trying to tell you, and then integrating them back in. And it sounds super woo-woo, and maybe it is, but it doesn't really matter, right? Because I think that we focus very often on our physical body, we focus on our mental body to the extent that we can, but we really don't focus on our spiritual body. You have people who are extremely religious, who, have, doctrine to follow. That's one practice of spirituality, but there's also just a bigger spirituality that's for someone like me that is more just like the connection to myself and to the energy of the world and to nature and to my place in it. And I find when that's really off, when you're not feeling integrated into your surroundings, it feels really it really discombobulates you and it makes you feel very unsettled. And that, for me, that was where a lot of the anxiety was coming from, a lot of the depression, because the bottom line is I was in a situation that was very wrong for me, but I couldn't start to see that until I started peeling back the layers through this self-compassion of understanding how I ended up there. And so that is the process that Alan allowed me to do through this particular method. And I found it extremely effective because it went far deeper than, tell me about your mother, how did you grow up? It wasn't that. It wasn't Freudian. It was based in metaphors. It was based on imagery and images and things that I could connect to beyond just what happened to me. It was like, okay, fine, what happened to you? But also, how did the feelings then stick in you and you deal with the feelings?
Yeah, it's funny. My wife is a sex and relationship therapist, and on one
Mhm.
of our first dates, she pulled out the, "How does that make you feel?" And I was like, "Oh no,
Yeah.
we're not doing that. Like, I'm not gonna be your patient." And she didn't mean it necessarily that way, and maybe
Mhm.
it was a little bit, and we still joke about that. But yeah,
Mhm.
and I'll share my quick story. I don't think I've really shared much else. Is during high school, I had a depressive period and saw a therapist, and they said, "Yeah, we can put you on antidepressant." And I was like, luckily, I think it was my junior year of high school, and I was in our high school. We actually had majors, and I was actually majoring in social
Mhm.
sciences. So I was taking a psychology class, a sociology class. So kind of had some awareness, and I was like, I think I'm good. Like, I think I
Mhm.
just need to go through this thing, which, you were 15 when you were put on them. And you speak about this a lot as well, of how the profession, even the DSM, which is like the Bible for
Mhm.
clinicians within the field, defines like, hey, when do you stop going through grief? You went on because your father passed away. Ironically, my father passed away when I was 7, and my mother actually chose to not tell me for 7 years. I just thought they got separated. And I was filling out a form for like high school football insurance, and
Mhm.
I was like, you need to put your mother's and father's insurance information in case something happens. And I was like, what do I put for dad? And she was like, she has a thick Russian accent. So she said, uh, a deceased. And I was like, diseased? Like he's an alcoholic? Because I was like, diseased? Why would I put diseased for his insurance? I didn't know anything about insurance. I'm like, maybe there's something here. And she was like, no, deceased. I was like, oh.
Mhm.
So he passed away. So yeah, when did that happen? And it was like, oh, 7 years ago. Okay, cool. So it's a very different, obviously, trauma. And maybe it was, and speaking to her later, she's like, she spoke to whoever her friends were, and that was kind of what they guided her to do to help this at the
It's a very
time.
Russian thing to do.
Yeah, very Russian thing to do, I guess. So yeah, if anyone's familiar with Soviet culture,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I've seen
So
some of our family stories along those lines where it's like, how really, that's the information you chose to
mhm.
withhold? And I realize it's a very cultural thing.
Yeah, yeah. I also found out at 16 that my sister had a different father, and like it put a lot of the pieces in
Alright.
place. I was like,
Mhm.
okay, cool. But yeah, but back to the piece of like, yeah, they were like, hey, we can put you on antidepressants. I was like, I think I'm good. I think I just like, I had this girl broke up with me, and like I think I need to deal with that. Like I don't
Mhm.
feel like my mother loves me enough, and like and whatever. And like I need emotional support right now. I don't think I need a
Mhm.
pill to change the chemical structure of my brain. Like I understand how that would make me feel better right now. But the same way I think it led me to kind of what I do on the physical side of like, cool, my neck's hurting. You can crack my neck, maybe. But then if we're not doing something to like strengthen my neck and change how my
Mhm.
posture is all the time, and address the root cause, which is where, I don't want to keep making the parallels to just like, well, I feel like what I do on the physical side is almost is like it's so much less important than
Mhm.
this mental health piece, where again addressing mental health stuff is just on par. It's not even on par. It's apples and oranges to me. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't. There's no question in there. But
Well, I feel like, psychiatry and mental health, like, I hate the word mental health. It's just
mhm,
become such a meaningless buzzword, but it's kind of the only thing that we really have. But, um, I think one of the great pitfalls of the psychiatric profession for the past 50 years is the fact that we've tried to treat it like it's a physical ailment. I mean, the line you get all the time, and the line I got was, you know, well, you would take insulin for diabetes, so why wouldn't you take an antidepressant for depression? And that's really, really like rooted itself deep into our lexicon.
yeah.
And we're starting to come out of that. We're starting to come out of it a little bit. I'm seeing the earliest kind of inclinations that's not going to hold up long term. There was just that big study kind of debunking the serotonin theory
Mhm,
of
mhm.
depression, and it's actually nothing new. Most psychiatrists who are keeping up with this stuff knew that the chemical imbalance theory was kind of bullshit. But it's really convenient for the media. It's
Yeah.
really convenient for a patient to believe that there's something happened to them, that something is wrong with them
Mhm.
that they have no control over, and that a pill will fix it. The problem is now we've been, prescribing various forms of antidepressants for about 50 years. We've been prescribing our current modern form of antidepressants more from about like the late 80s was when I think Prozac came onto the market. So we're getting to 25, 30 years. And there's no arguing that our mental health is way worse off than we ever were before. The
Yeah.
question of why is up for debate, but it's pretty clear to me that this strategy of throwing pills at people isn't working, and that we cannot compare it to, you put a cast on when you break your leg. It's not the same. It is not that much of a straight line. The problems here are much deeper. They're much more complex, and they require significantly more agency from the individual who's experiencing it to help themselves than physical problems. And that's a really, really tough thing to get through people's heads without one, you know, sh- people very easily feel shamed
Mhm.
because something happened to them or that somebody did something to them. And yes, that might be the cause, but it's still up to you as the individual to find a way out of that is, resonant with your own compass. And we are awful about helping people find that and then allowing them to do that and then giving them a way to make a living while they do that. I mean, it's it's tough, right? I
Yeah.
mean, especially if you're dealing with, like if you don't have your normal Maslow's hierarchy of needs taken care of, well, like what good is a week of therapy going to do you, right?
Right.
So there's that angle, and then there's okay, you do have your needs taken care of from a practical perspective, but the introspection is really, really difficult for people, and having support and breaking out of the stigma that the media and culture has created over the past 25 years. It's a really, really, really tall order. And I think we'll get there, but it's slow going, and we're at the very beginning of this.
Yeah, yeah, and again, you're battling big pharma, so it's a tough one for sure. A few things I want to jump back to, including I'm going to say it out loud for now. We'll come back to that. Pin in serotonin because that piece is pretty interesting
Mhm.
about the recent kind of research that has come out. But we did kind of skip over a little bit of your story. I did want to jump back because having listened to you so on so many recent episodes, doing all the research, I'm like, I've heard your story 700 times. I know you've told your story, 7,000 times. So we skipped over the chop thing. We'll
Yeah.
chop champion. I know that always is fun to talk about and comes up,
Mhm.
but just to come back to one of the questions I got from one of my friends here is what led you to finally starting to and deciding to come off of the
Mhm.
medication? And so I'll do my best to summarize it because I know you've told it so many times.
I'm
And
happy to do it too.
okay, well, go for it then. Go for it.
Yeah, sure. So it was kind of an amalgamation of things that happened at the same time. I just turned 30, and my dad died when I was 15. So I was starting to just have this realization that, you know, the older I get, I will have spent more time without my father than I had with him, which was an interesting, apex to pass. And then furthermore, I realized, oh, well, shit, I will now have also been drugged for more of my life than not. And that really didn't sit well with me, especially because I wasn't doing well. I was extremely depressed. I was having suicidal thoughts. I, you know, if antidepressants were working, they were doing a bad job because I was still very depressed. And that was just kind of the light bulb that went off in my head was I shouldn't be this depressed while on this many psychiatric drugs. That kind of coincided with this opportunity to travel around the world for a year that dropped into my lap kind of out of the blue. And I was having some memory problems at the time that we think were associated with the long-term antidepressant use. Like my business partner says she would tell me something and we'd have a conversation and I would completely forget it and not do whatever I had agreed to do. My mother was reporting similar things where we'd have a conversation about something and it would be out of my head the next day. And I didn't really realize this was happening. So I didn't want to travel the world for a year and one, forget it all. And then two, I didn't want to risk having to source these drugs in various pharmacies all across the world, So I just kind of said, maybe it's time to see what I'm like without them. I'm not doing well on them. So maybe I need new medication. Maybe I need nothing. Like, who knows? So I saw a psychiatrist and I mentioned her earlier. She wasn't particularly supportive, and it was the only time I had met with her. And she just said, okay, we'll stop going off them one at a time. So I was effectively pulled off cold turkey, which is terrible, terrible advice. And if I knew what I knew now, like that would not have been okay, but I didn't know. So I followed her advice, and that's kind of when things started breaking open. But it really took quite the severe kind of, knock on the head for me to get
Hmm.
there because until then I had believed if I'm this depressed on antidepressants, how depressed and like scary might I be off them? That was what I thought. It just took a really long time to realize maybe the question I should be asking is why am I still this depressed on antidepressants? Like this isn't working. How can we address the situation differently? So that was the shift that occurred.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of really powerful stuff there. So yeah, and at the end of the day, I wanted to come back to at the end of the book you did, and this is not medical advice, folks. Disclaimer. And I think
Well,
you
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 are a
did.
doctor, though, but not that
I
kind of
am a doctor, not going to talk about yes, mental health. Sorry, you don't like that term. Psychiatric disorders and getting
stuff.
people on and off medications. But the term you talk about that in the afterward, I believe, was the
Yeah.
hyperbolic tapering that research has now come to talk about. If you just want to
Mhm.
give folks a little bit, and again, this is not medical advice, folks. Every situation is different. We will always talk about that, obviously, but I do think one thing that I learned from your story is, if you do have better resources, if you do have better tools, and you're a more educated consumer, that was the quote I wanted to say. I think I missed it, and I wanted to come back to. it comes up a lot in the nutrition space. So I just had Rob Wolf on here. I give him a little bit of credit, I think. And the quote that comes out of that is, "It is not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Mhm.
And at some point, you have to take responsibility rather than saying, oh, well, this happened to me and that person told me this." And again, like if you're 15 and a minor, there's a reason you're not making those decisions. Again, the other joke in a lot of stand-up comedy is like the college, and you're taking a 17-year-old and they're deciding to take on this $100,000 debt
Mhm.
that is going to impact the rest of their lives. And like there's something wrong there. But anyway, yeah, so sorry to bring it back to hyperbolic tapering. If you want to just dive a little into that.
Yeah, sure. And yeah, I think that one of the big hopes that I have for my book is that it will actually help people have better conversations with their doctor. You know, like there's no world in which I'm telling people what to do. It's not it. But I do hope that this book can be can be a catalyst for conversation, and especially for the research when it comes to tapering off of these drugs, because it is, even though some psychiatrists are starting to understand and starting to get a little bit more information about this, it's still really not out there in a way that it needs to be. And there are so many people who are being unnecessarily harmed simply because their doctors don't know. It's not because they're terrible people. It's just because there's so much information out there and so many things to keep up with. So the current research that's being done, a lot of it's coming out of the UK. The US is shockingly, super far behind on this topic, but a lot of this is coming out of the UK and Europe. And the phrase for it is called hyperbolic tapering.
Mhm.
Basically, it's a smaller and smaller dose reduction. So the easiest way to describe this is if you're on 100 milligrams of a drug, instead of going down, like let's say the next pharmaceutical dosage that you could get by going to a standard pharmacy is 75 milligrams. Hyperbolic tapering says that's too big of a drop, that the brain cannot adjust reasonably fast enough to not create a whole bunch of side effects. So the way to mitigate that is smaller dosages. So hyperbolic is typically about a 10% reduction. So the first time you do your dose down, you would start at 100 milligrams, 10% of that, you get rid of 10 grams of it. So you'd take 90 for however long you and your doctor decide. And then once it's time to step down again, you take 10% of 90 milligrams. So we go down by 9 grams. Now we're at 81 grams. The next time, 10% of that, you go down by 8.1. And it creates this curve where you end up going through shorter and shorter or smaller and smaller dose reductions as you get down to the bottom, because what's been found in the research is that the hardest part of actually getting off these drugs for people is going to 0. So it's going from 100 to 0 is, more or less just as bad as going from 10 to 0 there sometimes. And so that the strategy with this is that by the time you get down to dropping down to 0, you have so little of this drug left in your system that it shouldn't cause nearly as many side effects. This isn't a perfect theory. There's a lot of logistical challenges with it, including like you can't get custom drug prescriptions direct from the pharmaceutical companies. So if they only offer 175, 50, and 37.5 milligrams of a drug, what are you supposed to do there? And the answer to that is one, some people are literally at home with drug scales and tweezers, and they, depending on the drug, are cracking open pills and measuring out beads one at a time. I mean, it's insane that so many people are having to do this in order to get off these incredibly common drugs, but it is what's happening. The better option is compound pharmacies. There are pharmacies that will actually make specialized compound solutions or capsules of certain drugs. So you can get your 81 milligrams without having to cut it up at home. But each of the drugs are different. You can't, for a capsule, it's one thing to open up and count the beads. But for a pill, you can't necessarily cut them in half, because if you do, sometimes you'll break the chemical chain that has the time release. Like, it's really complicated. You really need someone who knows what they're talking about here. And there's simply not enough education from both a pharmacological and a psychiatric, and I mean, God, general practitioners are prescribing these things like crazy. There's just not enough education for them to know how to safely taper people off of these drugs. And so that's really what I'm here to do. Like, I'm not here to tell people whether or not they should take antidepressants. Everyone's on their own journey. These drugs are not going away, but there is almost no support and no research to get people off them. And I think that is a huge shame given how many people are suffering on them or who want to come off them just to know what it's like to live an unmedicated life. So that's what I hope the book does.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other piece I think I'll add to that from your own words is the fact that, or the advice, I guess, is before going on it, make sure there is a plan to get off of it. So if it's like, hey, let's try this for 3 months, and there might be a little bit of a withdrawal symptom, and having that expectation versus just saying, you're depressed now, let's put you on this and we'll keep changing. And again, you talk a little about your journey and of like, well, you started taking this cocktail of stuff and then you had gut reactions. And so they put you on a gut pill and you can just keep doing it. And then again, even during the withdrawal concept, when you had that first talk, she was like, well, we can put you on Prozac to deal with the withdrawal symptoms. Like, I don't want to put any more pills in my body. You have the math of like, I've taken whatever, I don't want to mess up the number, but it's like, I've taken more pills than days I've been alive.
Oh yeah. Like multiple times.
Yeah.
3 or 4 times.
Yeah. So it's a crazy system. And I think that's one of the other big takeaways again is like, don't go into this. And that's one of the things I talk about on my Demand Better podcast. Like if you're starting personal training, and not to keep making this analogy, but that's what we say. Like if there's no assessment, if there's no game plan, like what are you doing? You're just there to show up and be like, I did Peloton, my legs felt like they burned a little. Cool. I feel good about it. And then it's like, but what is the plan 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What are you going to be doing? Like there's no getting better there. One of my friends here commenting, Mandy, saying, brave girl, really important conversation. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mandy.
Mandy, she's in Ireland, Germany. I always forget where you are, Mandy, traveling around the world.
I just want to pop in and add on to what you just said. I think that one of the things that this experience has really brought to light with me is that medicine has changed. It is not even what it was when, I'm 36. It's not even what it was in the 90s where it's changed so much between the insurance system and the way hospitals and doctors get paid. And, there's a huge doctor shortage. And what has happened is that the role of doctors is not what it used to be. And so the patient needs to have a lot more agency in their health in a way that, maybe we shouldn't, maybe that's crap that we have to do that, but we do. And it's, again, like, I'm going to make a physical analogy here because it's completely relevant. But so I had so many gut problems from all my years of antidepressants and they have continued. And so I was having just an awful time getting anywhere with regular doctors to fix the gut stuff. I'd been told to try the low FODMAP diet and like get a colonoscopy and maybe, cut out coffee and, eat more fiber. That's pretty much over 5 years what I had been told to do over these really kind of debilitating symptoms. And I just didn't buy it. So what I did is I finally just took some money out of savings and I paid out of pocket for the tests that I wanted to get. And what came up was awful. I don't need to go into the details, but let's just say I had about 4 or 5 really severe things ranging from infections to parasites that were causing all of these problems. And it was probably because my gut had been so wrecked over the years, it couldn't fight any of this stuff. But once we figured it out, because I paid for it, I was able to start treating it. So 9 months goes by, I want to get a follow-up test on this. I went to my GP in hopes that I could do it through insurance this time. She looked at my test and the first thing she said was, 1, this is too advanced for me. And 2, even if I wanted to order these tests, I can't. My system will not let me order it. And I don't know where you can go anywhere in town with about 500,000 people who can get them. To me, that just sheds such a light on what's going on in medicine right now, where here's this person who's supposed to be the expert, but because she is seeing dozens of people a day, she cannot be the expert in every single topic. And she certainly can't be the expert in the things that matter to me. So what does that mean? It means I have to find a way to be the expert. And I need to have enough humility to know that I'm not going to get all the answers from Google. But if I can bring her information and say, this is what we have, this is where we need to go, like, what do you think, can we work together? That's how people are going to start actually getting better, whether or not it's mental or physical health. But to put all of your hope on a doctor who's overstressed, overworked, underpaid, especially in the post-pandemic world, like, you're just kind of asking not to get anywhere. And so I think we have to be working more together and stop putting these people in unrealistic expectations, because they're only human too.
Yeah, 100%. And that goes back to this, every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. And to your point about the change in medicine, a lot of people forget that we talk about being in practice. It's a medical practice. We are literally, it's scary to talk about, but, we are practicing on every patient. Like, we do the best we can. We're making the most informed decision. Do no harm is the first rule of all medicine. But, and I forgot, that's actually, you have in Latin the beginning of the book.
Yeah, it's a little cheeky.
Well, but it's very relevant as we come back to that point. Not for Justin, but yeah, primum non nocere. I don't know if that can show up. That's fine. But yeah, I did have to translate. I did not know the exact Latin, but yeah, it's do no harm. And again, I think being critical of all these professionals, I have my gripes with, like, the chiropractors of the world, but at the same time, I know plenty of chiropractors who I would trust my body with way before a lot of physical therapists, just based on getting to know them and all that stuff. But from a big concept, it seems like, yeah, there's folks who unfortunately are just doing a disservice. And you hear some of these stories, and a lot of times with the way I practice, a very non-traditional medical model, I end up getting people who are 10 practitioners down, kind of like your story, and they're like, oh, I saw a chiropractor and he kept cracking my back and, like, didn't really fix anything. I saw my GP or my orthopedist, and they gave me injections in my knee, and similar kind of thing of, like, everyone's trying to kick this can down the road and just deal the best they can with what they're seeing in front of them. But yeah, the system is, even in the stories you tell, I do have sympathy for the physicians, the psychiatrists you talk about. Like, she certainly could have been more human. And I think I take little notes as I read.
I don't know if I have too much sympathy for her. I think she fell into the category of just crappy ones, but I just know they're not all crap.
Yeah, exactly. But even the front desk person, that's the thing, is like, and unfortunately, like, again, most consumers just don't know. And that's the thing. I start having political arguments, and it's like, the American healthcare model is ranked really low for how much we spend on it. I think we have the worst, like, outcomes versus spending of any system. And also, the other scary part of all this is, again, because we keep kicking this can down the road, I believe the estimate is by 2030, healthcare spending will exceed GDP, and maybe the system needs to break before we change anything. So that's a whole nother scary piece to this whole thing. Again, I think we can talk about the problems of healthcare for quite some time. I was actually, if anyone saw me on the video, I was looking to see if I could find the photo, our team photo, of when we were competing at regionals. There's that little photo shoot we did where we're, like, trying to be really, really serious. And
my phone somewhere.
We'll have to find that one.
Badass, right?
So badass. That was a fun time. But I want to talk about
simpler time, right? When
simpler time.
Working out was really just the big. I have it right here. I don't know.
She found it.
I don't know if I don't know if you're in this one, but that is one of the ones we did.
That is one of the ones.
Yeah, you're not in that one. I don't know where you were. Got cut
Yeah,
off.
what happened there?
Look at us.
Where did I go?
So 20 years old and just, wanting to look good and squat big. No other problems.
Young, dumb, and full of, if you know the saying.
Creatine.
Creatine, yes, that's the one. I wanted to highlight a passage in the afterword here. Before, I did get very excited when I read that dog's name was Negroni, because Negroni is my favorite drink. Although I've been recently switching to the Boulevardier. I know I always mess that one up.
Those are good. They've got, is that the egg white one?
No. And it's a Negroni, but instead of gin, it's whiskey. That's the only difference. So it's still sweet vermouth and Campari. And then there's all sorts of versions people do with cold brew and stuff like that. But yeah, the simple switch is, and if you go to a bar and you ask for Belvedere, they'll go to the vodka, because there's a Belvedere vodka, but you have to be precise about the
Boulevard. Yeah.
Boulevardier.
Yeah.
Boulevardier, I think. Anyway, I'm still learning, but I'll make them. It's my cocktail in the house. But I wanted to ask you if you've seen the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once.
I have not.
So the passage you write here on page 218, you wrote, "Now I want it all. I want all the futures I never had. I want the life I chose and the ones I didn't, et cetera, et cetera." I won't read the whole thing. It's always better in the author
Wait,
voice of the author.
that's the movie about the woman who just wants to get her taxes done, right?
That's sure. That's one way to summarize it.
I watched like an hour of it on the plane, and I was like, "This is not the right environment for this movie." When they
No.
were slapping each other with the hot dog fingers, and I was like, "All right, I gotta stop."
It's very weird. It's very weird.
This was recently, like 2 weeks ago that I saw it, and so
That's
this was
funny.
well
That's
after
funny.
this was written.
But that's why I bring it up. If you didn't make it to the end of the movie, and it's very weird. It's incredibly weird. I was like, and everyone, like everyone I saw that I kind of value their opinion on movies was like, "This is the most mind-boggling movie I've ever seen." And I started watching it, and I'm like, okay, like it's very weird. It's incredibly, incredibly weird. And I made it through, but the end part, the reason I'm bringing it back to that is kind of the spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, including you, is the fact that is what it's about. Is she's living, she's able to go see, and that's why it's called Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's not just the timeline, but it's all these different lives and different realities where she's a movie star in one, and she's a chef like you in another one, and they have like a Ratatouille funny kind of overlap there. But that is what it is like she was able to see all these other realities. And ultimately, the piece is like, I want to choose to live in this one because she, grows to power or whatever. But anyway, the way you write that paragraph almost literally is the same, like, I'm sure, like, parallel think of whatever it is that these guys, and I listened to a bunch of I forgot the name of the filmmakers, the Dans or the Daves, they have like the same first name, so they're whatever. But I've listened to them, and so anyway, it's pretty cool that anyone who's a fan of that, and again, I think it seems like for some people it's like, what the hell is this? And a lot of people though are like, this is the best movie like ever. I'm kind of like, it's definitely unique and whatever. But anyway, that paragraph is almost exactly the plot of that movie. So it's very, you should become a screenwriter. I'm telling you, there's something there.
I actually think I like dialogue. I think screenwriting would be a better medium for me than novel writing.
That kind of reminds me, if you said you like dialogue, so have you heard of or read The Courage to be Disliked?
I have not.
It's written again in a very unique way. It's based on Adlerian psychology. It's one of our favorite books by far, and we just got we didn't even know there was a follow-up called The Courage to be Happy, similar to Happiness is a Skill. So I'm sure there's tons of overlaps there, but it's written as a dialogue between. It makes it much easier to read in a lot of ways too. But it's kind of like a movie script with an older philosopher and like a 20-something young man. So one of our favorite books by far, introduced us to a lot of interesting connected, different versions of psychology, especially specifically Alfred Adler's Adlerian, if you want to get real fancy on it. But anyway, so I did make the note. I did want to come back as we're jumping around to the fact that most folks who know anything about depression, the basic theory is this chemical problem. And serotonin was the main molecule that was considered to be the problem. So they would have SSRIs, serotonin,
selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
Reuptake inhibitors. Yeah, selective. That's the word I was looking for. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Then there was the SR and there was like a
selective
norepinephrine.
Reuptake inhibitors. Then there's tricyclic antidepressants and MAOIs and.
But the basic recent research, and the thing with research is, even if it comes out now, it's still going to take, traditionally 7 to 14 years for, even if the research is really strong and definitive, for it to become part of kind of standard practice. So it takes a while to, and I heard you talk about it on the other show you just did. We were just talking about before about the movie. Medicating Normal, thank you. Of the fact, I think that's where you were talking about the fact that you want to get this into the hands of medical schools, and that's where we can really start to change the system. And so in terms of the impact we can have and things like that, it's really powerful. And again, I'm just so glad you were here. I'm hoping to amplify this. And again, for folks, I haven't actually talked to Brooke in a very long time. And she just sent out a random email, as anyone does who publishes a book, like, hey, help me get on the New York Times bestseller list. So I was like, hey, I have this small little platform
experience
here.
emailing 300 people I haven't talked to in years.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm always looking for an excuse to catch up with folks. On my Facebook, I always send like a little birthday thing, like, hey, how you been? And again, on Facebook, you know, probably 90-something% of people don't really care to be like, hey, let's catch up. So it's nice to finally be able to do that. And, you know, but at the end of the day, again, this message is, I think it's super vital. You know, I think that there's tons of messages these days that, like, you know, we want to talk about racial issues, we want to talk about gender issues, we want to talk about all these different things politically, but this is still one of the ones that I think affects such a large amount of people. And again, for anyone listening, I would bet either, you know, there's probably a handful of folks that are dealing with this that you either don't know about. I bet a lot of people are tuning into this because they are dealing with it themselves or some version of it. And again, I have a child on the way. You know, my hope is that if at any time my child needs to deal with some of these things, like, we have more resources and tools available, and we can have a better, more nuanced conversation about it, which I do think is missing right now. So yeah, you know, we want to make this kind of industry standard.
Yeah. Yeah. My big ask generally is if there's anyone out there who has, you know, influence on med school curriculums, please reach out. This book, it's not a pop science book. It's not packed with research. There's a little bit in the end, but it's really pure memoir, and it's designed to help practitioners and patients recognize antidepressant withdrawal for what it is, rather than a reemergence of an emergence of a new psychiatric illness, or perhaps a relapse of the old one. That is my main goal with getting it into doctors' offices. Is, you know, they have books like An Unquiet Mind, which is about bipolar, I believe. Bipolar, yes, An Unquiet Mind, and The Bell Jar, you know, about depression, and Unquiet Mind about bipolar. And the reason why they prescribe these to people in med school and psychiatric residents is so they can have an understanding of what it's like to be in the patient's brain when they're working through these issues. We don't have anything like that for antidepressant.
You mean it's not the little sad egg with the little
It's not
rain
the
on
sad
it?
egg. Yeah, it's not the sad egg getting rained on, you know. That it's just shocking how that little cartoon egg has basically changed the course of mental health treatment in this country, and it's really sad. But I just hope that the book can give everyone more empathy, and I mean that from patients for themselves who feel crazy and don't know that what they're going through is a chemical reaction.
Right.
And for practitioners to understand that, especially, like, it's not just psychiatrists, it's really important in emergency rooms. I mean, the half-life of Effexor is less than 24 hours. If you're in for a gunshot wound, or because you were in a car accident and you start going into Effexor withdrawal, you're one of these people who's got to go through it, and your doctor doesn't know that, things are going haywire in your body. That's going to affect your treatment. And if they don't know what that drug can do to people, well, you're going to have problems. So it's so important in emergency rooms. It's super important for OBGYNs who are prescribing this stuff to either mothers who are pregnant or for mothers having, you know, who have just had kids. Like, it's just so much more important than is currently given weight for across all political spectrums, all races, all practitioners. I feel like I'm beating my head against the wall constantly trying to get the message out there, despite how widespread this stuff is. But that's the goal, and I hope that it has legs long term.
Yeah, and I think it needs to, and it really is, again, battling. You know, it's big pharma. It's not little pharma. It's a big thing. And you know, again, just thinking of what random network I have of folks. I do have folks in physical therapy schools, I know. I do have some medical doctors, and I do believe there might be some stuff. So I'm going to think about that offline. I did have Rebecca Griffith, who is a physical therapist. She's in a hospital, though. She's the ED DPT, and ED usually stands for erectile dysfunction. Not in this particular case. It's the emergency department, which most people think of ER, the show. It's not really a room. So that was her big thing. It's not a room, folks. It is a department. So the ED, DPT, but yeah, she's it's a whole nother thing that physical therapists should be the folks. You sprain your ankle, you have some back issues. Hey, go see the physical therapist. We're going to save you possibly from having to go on opioids and all these other things. Yeah, you need an active solution. We did get a long, not so quick testimony. I just put it up on the screen there. It's a little too long to read. I'm going to take that off. Sorry. We'll read it later, but that's a friend of mine from high school. Or no, he has the same name, not David Mike, different person. But I'm not going to read it right now. Or that's spam. That might very well be spam. Oh yeah, there's Illuminati.
I saw Illuminati.
I saw Illuminati. I was like, okay. I thought he was sharing his testimony, and anyway, Mother Rose. Okay, cool. Yeah, never mind, folks. That was a fun one.
Yay, technology!
Big Pharma's trying to shut us down, yo. Big Pharma's coming. But anyway, there's a lot of cool conversations. I feel like we can dive down different paths of this, but I definitely want to see at the end of the day if we can make some change with this. So again, this is just a scratch of the surface, hopefully, and we can definitely see if we can push some of these narratives that, again, that's what I call my business Fit Care. I want to blend fitness and healthcare because there's problems with both sides of it. And there's the Demand Better podcast, which again, I don't know if we need to, we're going to say a lot of the same stuff there, but we might be able to get you some different voices there and ears there. But anyway, yeah, a lot going on here.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on, Brooke. I know you're doing your whirlwind tour there. And again, we only very briefly talked about the Chopped episode and
yeah, you can go lighten up the conversation by watching me compete on Chopped. So Hulu, season 32, episode 6. It's very entertaining, 45 minutes.
I found it on YouTube TV, so it's available there. Yeah, I did have to. I was like 52 seasons. Jeez. I know.
They do like 3 or 4 seasons a year.
And they're giving out $10,000 each episode. That's crazy. I don't know if they did that for all of them or whatever, but yeah. Anyway, I'm sure they make it back pretty easily. If anyone wants to see Brooke drop a crab and then serve it, is what they'd look like.
And they wouldn't let me serve it. It was very rude.
I know. And again, she talks about that. It's funny. I did go. I use an app to track which episodes I see. So I went to track that, and somebody complained about you and was like, she should have gotten eliminated every round or whatever. And I was like, and they were like, the judges hated her. Why did they keep her on? And I was like, if you're familiar at all with television, they probably shot like 12 hours. I think I've heard you say. And,
this is why you don't Google yourself. I haven't heard that guy talk, but I'm pretty okay.
It was a random, whatever. I defended you. I was like, hey, I know her. And, I was like, yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, you can even see the dishes, though. The French guy who was like, it almost seemed unfair because he's like, I've studied with, all Anthony Bourdain and all these other guys and whatever. And like, and then his pasta dish, that did not look good. Yeah. And you still keep in touch. I think I've heard you say with the second place guy.
Yeah. His name's Doug Wetzel. We haven't spoken too much really since the pandemic, but he's based in Baltimore, and it's just like the nicest human on the planet.
Seemed like it. Yeah, he definitely seemed like it, and yeah, very cool. So yeah, I mean those. I know, I've known a lot of folks who've gone on random shows like that, and
editing's real.
Editing is real. It's funny. One of my childhood neighbors, he was trying to become an actor. He's a funny guy, and he went on like every possible whatever. It was a dating show. He went on America's Worst Cooks, which is another Food Network show, I think, with I forgot everyone's names, but anyway. But yeah, it was really funny seeing him and hear him tell some of the behind the scenes stories. But yeah, those shows are they're entertaining on their own, obviously, but at the same time, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that we don't get to see. So something for folks to walk away with. So yes, thank you again for being on here. I want to be respectful of your time. We're gonna make it under the hour. I got to find that photo of our photo, team photo shoot.
That one. Yeah, I don't have those. Those are from
no.
that was the year I had a Samsung phone and
I was impressed how quickly you found that one though.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, I know there's somewhere. I probably have them saved somewhere. I don't know anymore, but somewhere. Yeah, that's what I was trying to search for it as I was listening to you. I was multitasking, I'll admit. But tell folks where the best places are to find you. And yeah, thank you again.
So Brooke Siem, BROOKESIEM, one word. That's on Twitter, which I don't really tweet, but it's there. Instagram, which is where I'm at the most. Also my website, brookesiem.com. I also have a newsletter called Happiness is a Skill, which comes out twice a month. It's basically about the skill of happiness. We cover a lot of different sorts of stuff there, everything from research to philosophy to just general musings, whatever we find. And yeah, that's it. And then my book, May Cause Side Effects, can be found wherever books are sold. It's available through Barnes & Noble, local bookstores, etc. In the US, in Canada, you can get it through Indigo. The UK, it's available through Foils, I believe, and down in Booktopia in Australia. And then if you get the book, please, please, please leave a rating and review. That's always an author's thorn in our side to try and make the algorithms happy with reviews. So.
where are the best on like on Amazon? I know I've left some reviews there. Is that the best place wherever you buy it?
For authors, Amazon reviews are really valuable because you feed the Amazon monster.
Right.
More reviews they see, the more likely they are to make sure your book is promoted. So that is always really important. Barnes & Noble doesn't really have a rating review system that's in the same way. So cool. And Amazon, everyone orders from Amazon now, so kind of can't knock it too much. So
awesome.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Well,
oh, our friend Jess just gave a thumbs up and a wave. She had some questions, but we might have to connect y'all offline. That's all right. So yes, thank you again. Everyone go check out Brooke, get the book. It does rhyme. That's fine. I'm doing it unintentionally. But yeah, I hope you got 1% better. Don't forget to share this with someone who you think might benefit from it. Again, I'm confident there's people in your life, if you're listening to this, who are dealing with some version of this, unfortunately, and it's definitely under talked about, underreported. And so yeah, this is very, very vital to spread this message, and again, just bring at least empathy to the conversation and bring some understanding to it. So yeah, with that, we're going to sign off. And again, folks, hope you got 1% better, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
And